Hello everyone, welcome to Middle Age Gaming. Today I want to talk about the orthodoxy and the reformation of Warhammer and Warhammer 40k in particular. A little bit of background: in 1995 I walked into a hobby store, not a Games Workshop store, just a hobby store, and I came looking for Gundam models, of all things. And I saw these little figurines, these little like soldier figurines in a display case, and I just walked right by them because, that didn't interest me. When I went over to look at the models, the Gundam models, they had these awesome boxes of miniatures that had this great artwork on the cover. It looked amazing. There was all these books, rule books. There was this thing called White Dwarf magazine. There was this thing called Inferno magazine. And I was like, what is this? This seems very interesting. And as a teenager, I was like, oh, okay. So instead of buying any Gundams, I went ahead and bought some White Dwarfs and some Inferno magazines. And I went home and I had my introduction to Warhammer 40k. So, in the beginning, all the books and literature and lore that I consumed was very, well, I'll say orthodox. I'll use that word orthodox, meaning you had Space Marines, these powerful angelic beings, and they were spoken of in terms of being angels to normal mortals. They worshipped this entity called the God Emperor of mankind, who lived on a throne and with psychic powers was able to direct psychers throughout the warp. And for me, as a young man who was trying to figure out, myself and even, what I believed, the idea that I was reading a science fiction world that was so bleak and so dark, because I had never been exposed to grimdark before. I was enthralled by it. I loved the fact that if a human being strayed from the imperial truth or the light of the emperor, he would be corrupted by chaos. He would be corrupted by these demonic entities that lived in the warp. And at that age, I thought it was amazingly cool, all the demonic entities that lived in the warp. I thought that was awesome. And the orcs, the Eldar, the Dark Eldar, the Tyranids, the Tau wasn't around yet, but all of those races and beings in this universe made sense. Everything was trying to kill everything else. There was no, nobody was having any sort of second thoughts about, the universe. Mankind could not live with any species, and any species that it came across had no desire to live with mankind. Orcs want to kill you. Eldar want to kill you because they blame you for chaos. Dark Eldar want to basically bring you to their S&M cruise liner to have their way with you. Tyranids want to consume you and turn you into some sort of genetic mutation. And all that is bad, except it's even worse because chaos is there. And you don't want to be food for a Slaneshi demon for the rest of eternity. So it was great. And the characters, of course, that led me into the novels. The characters of the Space Marines were unreproachable. If you wanted to hear about honor, glory, dedication, it was there. It was there for you with the Space Marines. And it was very refreshing for me. If you wanted to hear gritty science fiction war, like with the Ghost novels, you saw how bleak it was for an Imperial soldier during this time. And as time went on, I got into Warhammer Fantasy, which was just as good to me at the time. It was exactly up my alley. The same type of thing, only in a fantasy setting, and it became my go-to hobby. I have many. I have two full armies. I have an army of Black Templars, and I have an army of orcs. I also have a couple of figurines from different fantasy armies that I never completed. But it was not about that. Wasn't part of that part of the hobby. Wasn't what drove me to it. What drove me to it was the settings and the lore. So, as you know, we are now in a kind of a new phase of 40k, or at least relatively speaking. When the Horus Heresy came out, it was kind of jarring to me in the beginning, because I had always thought that the Primarchs of the Space Marines were super beyond reproach. They were super intelligent. They were super smart. The only reason why that the traitors turned against the Emperor was because they were of hubris, because they thought they were better than the Emperor, or whatever. When I started reading the Horus Heresy, I had never read what I would consider wishy-washy Space Marines. I never had read Space Marines that weren't completely, like, on board with whatever it is they were doing. There was no, like, confusion. And the Warhammer Horus Heresy series of books shows the Space Marines of all different chapters in a very flawed and human light. They show them as very easily manipulated, very easily, like, quick to temper tantrums, quick to anger, very how should I put it, emotional and given to their emotions, depending on what, you know, chapter you're talking about. They all seem to be the same. They were persecuting these wars throughout the galaxy. You know, sometimes they felt bad about it, sometimes they didn't, you know. And as I read them, I found myself not liking them. But I kept on with them because I love the setting, I love the universe. I figured, okay, let me give them a try. And I kind of figured out what they were trying to do. They were trying to reset what people believe about the Warhammer 40k universe. They wanted to show that, you know, the whole thing was this tragic misunderstanding, manipulation, whatever you want to say. But as I kept on reading them, it actually started to reinforce the same orthodoxy of the earlier novels, which is supposed to take place in the future. Of course, this is why the Space Marines are uncompromising. Of course, this is why the Inquisition is so brutal. Of course, this is why, you know, they don't mind sacrificing, you know, whole armies for, you know, to try to stop chaos. It actually makes more sense now. It actually has, the Reformation has made me think, oh, this is exactly why there is no break in a Space Marine. This is exactly why they fight the way they do. This is exactly why they hate the heretic and the alien. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it actually works for me. It actually works in my idea of 40k. I don't know if this is what the writers intended. I know the writers believe they're writing satire. They're trying to, I think they chuckle as they write some of these things down because they think, oh, this is so over the top. But for many fans, including myself, we eat it up. It's my version of a pulp fiction book. This is my comfort food. Warhammer in general is my comfort food. Now, I'm going to end this with real quick on the video games that have come out. There has been some really good Warhammer 40k video games. There has been some pretty bad Warhammer 40k video games. But what I always am grateful for, I guess, is it always seems like whoever is making the Warhammer game definitely wants to nail the aesthetic. They definitely they want to nail the look and feel of the universe, and I appreciate that, especially with all the newer games that are coming out. Warhammer Total War is a great example of how Warhammer Fantasy is supposed to be. Now I know Age of Sigmar is now what everybody has been forced to, because the end times kind of ruined everything, and that was weird. I loved the end time novels. I loved it. I wasn't expecting that to be the actual end of Warhammer Fantasy, so that was kind of weird. But even a game that has had mixed reviews, like the Necromunda game, is that game flawed? Sure, there's some flaws in it, but they nail the aesthetic of an Underhive. They nail the gangers and how they would actually act. So I guess, as somebody who's followed the hobby since 1995, and now we are in 2021, I find myself with my sons, with my children, as they get on into their teenage years, I find myself trying to introduce them to 40K, to Warhammer, because it gives people lessons. It gives you, nobody does the wrong thing and gets rewarded for it. If you make a pact with a demon, you know that person, it's not going to end well for them. And I think that is missing in a lot of fiction and literature now. That I don't want to say, for lack of a better term, the black and white, the good versus evil. There is no gray. Of course, you can argue in 40K there is no good. The way the Imperium is, it's a very bleak and brutal type of world to live in, whether you're human or not. I mean, so it shouldn't be something that you would desire, but it gives a lot of lessons about courage, about honor, about self-sacrifice. I'm not saying that you couldn't, like a young teenage girl wouldn't enjoy it. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, for me, because of my children, I try to introduce them to this world, and try to get them into the hobby, because like I said, I have a couple armies, and I would love, with this lockdown stuff, not to have to leave my house to try to play a game. Alright, well, thank you guys for watching this little video, and I will talk to you all again next time.
Potential destinations where I can find her. I hope she's worth all this trouble.